This is how the Spanish city of Guernica looked in the days after it was bombed by the Nazis in April 1937. But perhaps we remember it better through its surrealist interpretation by Pablo Picasso. Arguably his masterpiece, this is a nightmare scene of cruel brutality, oppression and suffering that lacks any colour, mimicking perhaps the limited spectrum of movie cameras at the time. With all the monochrome realism of war-torn news footage, Hollywood movies opted instead to escape into imaginative new places, leaving world issues very much behind. When they finally caught up with them, however, they were not without romance, with movies serving not just to entertain, but to enlist. And it is exactly this one-sided message that undermines many American war films. In Steven Spielberg's worryingly self-assured Saving Private Ryan, for example, the lesson here isn't one for compassion for the other side, but to reinstall prejudices of the past. It is exactly this boiling down of complex history into simple narratives that is the very problem. And when we watch old newsreels of war propaganda, we see the idyllic visions of governments at both ends, propped up by their loyal tripods of unwavering support. If these images are the polite lies of corrupt nations, then what exactly does truth look like when painted using only the messiest colours of human emotion? In this episode, we'll be looking at Andrzej Żuławski's neglected masterpiece, Possession. Released in 1981, it tells the story of Anna and Mark, a married couple who have already grown apart before we even meet them, only to then witness their rapid descent into a frenzy of relentless arguing that makes Kramer versus Kramer pale in comparison. The film itself holds an interesting distinction of being the only film to be both banned in the UK as a video nasty, and yet to also be nominated for the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. Possession fell into a pit of isolation, which very much remains there to this day. Żuławski wastes no time in throwing us headfirst into a situation we're completely unaware of, as it opens with Anna ending her relationship with her husband Mark while standing outside of their apartment in West Berlin. And with that abrupt introduction, we already feel outside of the loop, as the camera tracks across their bedroom, eavesdropping from above.
Maybe all couples go through this.
Yeah.
One mustn't be afraid.
No.
One must speak honestly.
Is it difficult?
Were you unfaithful to me?
The truth is not really. Were you?
No.
There's always someone else when these things happen.
Not in this case.
And it is exactly this sense of claustrophobic surveillance that we are supposed to feel. After all, the film's opening images practically enforce not just the political landscape of post-war Europe, but establishes the Berlin Wall as a visual metaphor for divorce itself. With Anna nowhere to be found, we see the connection between Mark's growing insecurity and that of the suspicious gaze of the ever-present border troops from the east. It is at this point, barely 5 minutes in, that we get a very clear political message that no matter which side you're on, the same seeds of paranoia can still grow, often flourishing in total isolation as we reduce the invasion of privacy to nothing more than a casual glance at postcards.
You say it's better with him than with me.
I get more out of it.
Look what you're doing!
No one is good or bad, but if you want, I'm the bad one. And if I knew he existed in this world, I would have never had Bob with you.
Get up! Get up! Get up! Get up!
And just when things started to make a little sense, it evolves yet again in a hyperventilating fever that reaches a whole new level of bizarre as Mark and Anna's behaviour grows increasingly over the top and is amplified into a place very few films about relationships dare explore. Unsatisfied with his own investigation, Mark hires a private detective to follow Anna in a city full of secrets to find out where she goes all day. And when we, like the detective, discover what she's been hiding in a run-down apartment in Kreuzberg, we can't quite get our heads around it. and the film yet again shifts gears into one of genuine horror. With the East Side border guard still looming over, we see in an early scene of domestic rage our default settings for communication when we're literally up against a brick wall. As Anna prepares raw meat for a meal she never intends to cook, we see the desperate human reaction to hold on to something that has its own mind.
What have I done that you hate me so much? Huh? I
Get
deserve
off
this?
it! No! Get off it!
Told you to
Get
stop
off!
coming
Get
around.
off! Get off!
This is disgusting.
Yes.
Look what we've become.
Yes.
Talk to me.
These are the arguments that later repeat themselves in these cold rooms, where we see not logical behavior, but the unnecessary exercise in prolonging conflict.
I can do it myself.
My job. I'm
Very
better
nice.
at it.
Maybe you could do it when both of us home. My love, trust me, you're right. All the time you are fucking your ass up. You want me to believe you?
Oh, yes! A monster, a whore. I fuck her on with everybody. Whenever you
I
turn
want
her
it.
on, I fuck her on with everybody!
I want it.
On every side!
Do you really care?
Possession is a film that exists under our feet, in the very places that link our cities to a past embedded deeply like a parasite. Its true horror doesn't come from any metaphorical creature, but in the very real subway tunnels that link us forever back into our painful lives of separation, with nothing left but our most primitive versions of ourselves to keep us company. It was underground Berlin that saw the last days of the Third Reich, and in 1981 we see the stark differences between the cinema of victors and those who have lost everything, as filmmakers of the German New Wave go deep into their historical fabric with films that force reflection, while American films of the same year instead rebrand the exact same message as a self-idolized vision of a world superpower. Indiana Jones makes his living by digging up the past of other countries, rarely his own. What Andrzej Żuławski shows us with Possession is the reality of war in all its ugly complexities as a series of relentless arguments with a camera that gets too close.
On the phone.
These are the very conversations that were collected and stored, like tins of food, by the secret police of the Soviet Union at a time when everybody was suspicious. Today, German films still closely examine their past, careful not to let history repeat itself. And even in the most unlikely of stories, see a celebration of true freedom, as Lola is finally able not to walk through dark subways, but to run freely through the sunlit streets of an undivided city. On the next episode, we'll be driving down the sleazy highways of American culture and 90s teenage angst in Greg Araki's shoegazing reject, The Doom Generation.